You probably know that there are a lot of blanket recommendations about money and finance on the internet. A blanket recommendation refers to advice or suggestions that are given broadly to a large group of people without considering individual differences or individual needs or individual circumstances. So when people are giving blanket recommendations, they're usually implying that the recommendation should apply to everyone in the group, to everyone that they're talking to, regardless of someone's specific situation or context. Here are some examples. Max out your Roth IRA. Buy more house because real estate always goes up in price. Or buy blank. And you can insert any stock, bond, index fund, or other security or investment in that blank. I'm going to touch on each of these 3 examples later in the video and why they all have the potential to be bad money tips, just in case those are things you've heard of before. But here's the actual big takeaway that I want you to get from this video, especially for those of you just learning about personal finance and how to manage money. The takeaway is this: you should simply be careful. Don't immediately take an action on your money based on what some stranger on the internet says, or even if it's someone you know in real life. The best and the most legit guidance that you can get on your particular finances will be when someone understands the full picture. So short of a professional looking at all of your finances, pretty much you're the only one that really knows your full picture. Now, preferably, if you're going to talk to someone else, they should have some experience or the proper credentials. When I say full picture, what I mean is that they know the details of your life, the details of your goals, and the details of your finances. Because without that information, blanket recommendations or money tips on the internet, they have to be taken with a grain of salt. You have to vet that information properly. Now, what I will say is I personally think that the fact that we have access to information on the internet and all of this information about personal finance and investing is now democratized, I think this is all a good thing. I think that there have historically been a lot of gatekeepers in the financial space who purposely made it hard for others to build wealth. The big problem for all of us is that with all of the good information, there also comes bad actors. There are also people giving out bad information as well. So that's what I want to help you all navigate. Now, before I touch on those 3 examples of those blanket recommendations that I want to warn you about, I want to first cover some general rules of thumb for learning about money, whether that's on the internet or anywhere else. I think that these 5 tips are going to help you be more aware of good information versus bad, and basically, I just want to help you protect yourself. So, here are 5 tips for learning finance. Number 1, look for certifications. First and foremost, I don't think that a certification makes someone smarter than someone without a certification. That is a story for another video, at least not 100% of the time. But the thing is, if someone has a financial certification, a license, or some other credential, at the very least you know that they've gone through some education or training, and depending on what it is, they've hopefully had to take some form of ethics. This is not a foolproof way to vet people because I do think there are a lot of great people teaching financial education who don't have any credentials or any letters after their name. They just have a real life experience and maybe they act ethically because it's their own moral code. I just think it's something to keep in mind. All right, tip number 2 for learning finance: learn to distinguish financial education from financial advice. So let's start with financial advice. Financial advice is this broad term, and there's a lot of gray area about it depending on who you're talking to. But typically when we're talking about financial advice, it means a professional recommendation or advice that you're given in regards to your financial situation. So online, you might see it in the form of investment advice or strategies when people are telling you how to invest your money, but it can actually cover a wide range of topics like how to plan for retirement, tax strategies, what insurance to buy, like I said, it's pretty broad in terms of what topics it can cover. Now, financial advice, however, tends to be specific in terms of a person's situation. Meaning, even though I feel like it can be related to so many different financial topics, when someone is giving financial advice, the intent is to say, hey, you listening to this piece of advice, listening to this tip that I'm about to tell you, this is for you and this should work in your situation. So that's what I mean by financial advice can be broad and span many different areas and topics, but the intent is typically specific. It's like telling a person, this is what you should do, this is my recommendation, and it should work for you. So if you think about it with that definition, technically, it's impossible to really receive legit financial advice from a YouTube video or an article or a blog. And that's because the person who created that video or that article is not looking at your actual life and your actual financial situation. One way that I like to define financial advice is someone telling you what to do with your money or with your financial situation. Their intent is suggesting that you take an action. So take all of that, push it to the side for now, and let's talk about financial education. So financial education, opposite to that or different from that, is more like information, right? Information that is generally considered safer to consume. That is, as long as this education or information is based on facts. So financial education can be thought of as general information about financial products, techniques, methods, strategies, as opposed to someone telling you what to do with your money. So I like to think of it as explaining what something is or how something works, like the pros and cons. So education has the intent to provide you with information. That's it. And then maybe you will be better informed before you go ahead later on to make any decision or take any actions. All right, now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but in the real world, financial education versus financial advice is not always easy to distinguish. Sometimes they have overlap, and even regulators will consider it to be gray area sometimes. Here's an example. If someone tells you to max out your 401k, that can technically be considered financial advice because someone is telling you to put your money in a specific financial product, when in reality, this blanket recommendation doesn't work for everyone. It may not be the best advice for you if someone doesn't know your situation because they don't know what your taxes look like. They don't know your plans for retirement. They may not even know whether or not you have access to a 401k account through an employer. Now, on the other hand, one can argue that saying open a bank account is basically telling someone what to do with their money. But typically, this is not considered financial advice. This is something general and it is foundational. So financial education can look more like, this is what a 401k is. Here are the pros and cons. Moving on to tip number 3 for learning personal finance, cross-reference your information. So if you come across some new information and you aren't sure about it, learn more before you do anything. Cross-reference your information with other resources or other people or professionals. Now, even when it comes to personal finance education and not advice, even when it's just education we're talking about, I truly think that you should be learning from multiple sources. When you learn personal finance from different sources, it's going to give you more exposure to all the different viewpoints and all the different approaches and strategies out there. And just having more information is going to help you spot when something is scammy or something is sketchy. It's hard to know if something sounds weird if you're in a vacuum and only getting your information from one place. All right, tip number 4. I alluded to it already, but utilize professionals as needed. So this is my humble opinion, what I'm about to say right now, but I truly believe that if you want to build wealth now or into the future, then at some point you can and you should utilize financial professionals. And I don't just mean a financial advisor who's going to manage your investments, right? Because there are so many automated ways to invest these days. It can mean that, but if you're going to build wealth, you're going to eventually need to lean on tax professionals, maybe financial planners who can look at your entire financial life, or other people who have more expertise than you. So if you've learned something on the internet and you're not sure you understand it or you want proper guidance, then I would say consider consulting with a professional. Find someone that you can ask and get guidance before you do anything that can derail your finances. All right, last tip, number 5, keep in mind general versus specific advice. So I touched on it earlier when I was talking about the difference between financial advice and financial education. But a general rule of thumb is the more specific information is, the more you should be ready to inspect it with a magnifying glass. Or just walk away from it altogether. Whereas if it's more general and more foundational knowledge, it'll probably be less likely to harm you. I'll get into an example in a second. All right. So I hope these tips are starting to give you a feel of what I mean by be careful, beware of bad advice. I just want to give you some guidance on how to navigate financial topics on the internet because I do want you to learn. I do want more people to learn. I just want you to be careful about where you learn from and who you learn from. So before I get into those 3 examples I mentioned at the beginning of the video, for those new here, hello, my name is Lissa Prudencio. I'm a personal finance expert and accredited financial counselor. If you're enjoying this video so far, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. It'll help me help more people. All right, so let's talk about those blanket recommendations that I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the video. These are things that I think you should take with a grain of salt. So the first one was max out your Roth IRA. I see this a lot in the personal finance space, so I want to touch on it. A Roth IRA is a type of individual retirement account that offers unique tax advantages compared to other retirement accounts. Now, for many people, using a Roth IRA can be a strategic tool to grow your nest egg and prepare yourself for retirement while optimizing your tax strategy. Now, don't get me wrong. The problem isn't that there's anything inherently wrong with a Roth IRA. It's considered a great financial product by many people. The problem is that if this is taken as a blanket recommendation, that everyone should do this, everyone should get a Roth IRA and everyone should max it out, then that's where the problem is, because there are a lot of reasons that a person might not want to do that. I'll give you a couple of examples here. So first, not everyone can actually contribute directly into a Roth IRA. We're not talking about backdoors here, which is a more intermediate topic, but it's true. Not everyone can go open a Roth IRA and contribute into it, at least not without getting a tax penalty. And that is because there are income limits. If you make above that limit, like your income at your job is more than that limit, then that can mean that you can't contribute to a Roth IRA. And if you do open one anyway and put money into it, you can be subject to tax penalties from the IRS. So that's just an example of why blanket recommendations like max out your Roth has to be taken with a grain of salt. And you have to understand that it doesn't apply to all people. Another example on this particular topic is that maxing out your Roth is really a tax strategy. So quick recap, if you haven't watched my other videos, I've mentioned this before, but the key difference between an individual brokerage account, a taxable brokerage account, meaning you go open a brokerage account so you can start investing today, the difference between that type of account and a retirement account is the tax advantage that you can get with a retirement account. Now, depending on the type of retirement account you have, there are different tax benefits, right? So for example, 401ks and 403bs are considered pre-tax. You are deferring tax. You're not paying income tax on that money now, but you will in the future. Whereas other accounts, like a Roth IRA, means you are funding it with after-tax money today so that as it grows and into the future, when you take it out, you're not going to be taxed on that money or that growth. So there's actually different strategies on what retirement accounts you should use dependent on your tax situation. for people who are in higher tax brackets today than they will be in retirement, they might want to approach which accounts they use differently than people who are in a lower tax bracket today and who are going to be making way more later. I'm not going to get into the numbers or anything like that, but I just want to point out another reason why you can't take blanket information, especially when it's specific about a specific type of financial product. Even though people love Roth IRAs and other retirement accounts, there are more details as to who qualifies, who can put money here, and how it affects taxes. All right, are you still with me? Let's go into that second example of what I would consider a bad blanket recommendation, and that is buy more house because real estate will always go up in price. Let me first explain what that means in plain English. That is someone telling you to buy the most expensive house that you can because guess what? It's gonna be worth more later anyway. It's gonna appreciate and whatever, you can sell it later for more and make money off of it. So this blanket recommendation is pretty straightforward and easy to explain. Because if you tell someone to buy a more expensive house without knowing their actual financial situation, that can be super sketchy. It might lead someone to buy more house than they could afford, taking on more debt than they can afford. And if they do that and struggle with payments, they can end up paying more interest in the long run. And the other thing is this potential appreciation. So the blanket statement that real estate is going to go up. So the thing is, while the value of homes do tend to rise over time, there are many factors that can cause them not to go up in price, at least not for a certain time horizon. So for someone to tell you like, just do it, just buy it because the value is going to go up, that's an incomplete picture, right? They don't know your time horizon. They don't know when you're planning on potentially selling this house. They also don't know your geographic location because some places are more likely to appreciate in value than others. So again, these are just more examples of why you have to take recommendations like this with a grain of salt. At the end of the day, you need to analyze your actual financial situation to understand if recommendations like these make sense for you in your situation. All right, number 3, the last example was buy blank. So this one's my favorite. It's my favorite in terms of what I like to talk crap about. So I'm extremely biased from an ethical point of view, but also as a fiduciary. I just don't think it's right for anyone on the internet to like stand on a soapbox and yell at everyone and tell them what securities to buy, like what exact things to invest in. Now, for some people, I understand why this happens, right? I think because there have been gatekeepers in investing for so long and the people just learning about it now, it's hard to really understand it unless there are real examples being talked about, right? If I'm just talking about securities and stocks, it's not as impactful as if I walk you through like, hey, look at this particular ticker symbol. Let's take a look at it. Let me explain to you what it is and why it's a good one, right? So there's some gray area there as to like what is education versus advice. But the reason I personally think that this is something that you should definitely look at with some skepticism, there's a couple reasons, but one, if someone on the internet tells everyone else to buy a specific security, like a specific stock. Think about people on Reddit like telling others to buy a specific stock. That could actually end up manipulating the market, which actually can get them in a lot of trouble. But more importantly for you, the consumer who might follow that recommendation, that would be you listening to someone who more likely than not hasn't done analysis to really weigh like how that security will perform against all other possible ones. And more importantly, that person doesn't know your financial situation. What if your entire portfolio was already what they're telling you to invest in? Telling you to invest into more of that is basically making your portfolio a lot riskier, right? Because you're just going to be all in one thing. When at the end of the day, to limit your risk, you have to diversify. Now, if all of this is going over your head because you don't invest yet and you don't fully understand it, don't worry about it. The takeaway is be careful when someone is giving specific investment advice and telling you exact financial products to purchase, right? Like if someone is telling you to buy this insurance policy because it is the best one, or telling you to buy this stock because it's the best one, All I'm saying is take that with a grain of salt, vet it some more, learn more about it before you just take what they're saying and implementing it into your finances. So I'm not telling you that all of the information out there is bad information. I do think there's a lot of good with people sharing information, especially in this topic of finance that has historically been gatekept. I just have that one takeaway for you that I've been trying to emphasize the entire video, and that is be careful. Vet things properly, don't act immediately, continue to educate yourself, and of course, use those 5 tips that I mentioned earlier in the video. If you do all those things, I think you'll be okay, and I think you'll continue to improve your finances. All right, until next time, peace out.